Round Britain Quiz with Kirsty Lang.
Hello and welcome back to the RBQ Country House in a quiet corner of the East Midlands, where we've brought together our teams to give them a suitable atmosphere for concentrating on their quizzing endeavours. With me today are the pairs from the north of England, Stuart McConey and Adele Garras, and Scotland, Val McDermott and Alan McCready. Four better read and more mentally agile people you could hardly hope to find in the same room. They will be engaging in cerebral combat in a minute, and let's see who comes out victorious today. If you can hear furious whispering going on, it's because they've just been handed today's questions on paper. It's the first time they've had the slightest sniff of what they're going to be asked, and there's always some excitement or maybe dismay as the size of the task sinks in. You can see the questions too at home as part of the programme information on our webpage under today's transmission date. So do have a look and you can join in. But first, before we let our teams loose, let me remind you of the question that I left hanging tantalisingly at the end of last week's programme. I asked why you might be nervous about a film based on the life of Henri Charrière, a Schumann piano suite, a 1970s TV series starring Wendy Craig, and the operatic forerunner of Miss Saigon. Now, I hope this wasn't too tricky, as these things go. You'd be nervous because they'd give you butterflies in two languages, just to make things slightly harder. So the film, of course, was Papillon with Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen, the prison drama, remade in 2017 with Charlie Hunnam and Rami Malek. And a papillon means butterfly in French, as does papillons, plural. The piano suite by Robert Schumann, composed in his early 20s. And then the TV series is the Colour Lane sitcom Butterflies. And the inspiration for Miss Saigon was, of course, the opera Madame Butterfly by Puccini. All very straightforward. And I'll have another teaser question for you at the end of today's programme. But now our teams have had a minute or so to look at their first question. So we're going to start with Stuart and Adele for the north of England. Your opening question has come from the Round Britain quiz listener, Michael Hipkins. How could Alan Clark's controversial history of the Great War, depending on gender, produce either a smuggler of drugs or a person viewed with affection in the northeast? How could Alan Clark's controversial history of the Great War, depending on gender, produce either a smuggler of drugs or a person viewed with affection in the northeast?
So, which end should we go from? Should we go
Let's start from the
beginning.
The beginning.
Well, the controversial history of the Great War, and a phrase that's now been used many times about our current situation on a famous Twitter feed and an organisation, is lions led by donkeys.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we think it's about donkeys, basically.
Yeah.
And in the northeast,
A term of affection is a hinny.
hinny.
When a donkey...
That's a female donkey or a female mule.
No, it's
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
No.
so mule
So
is the other bit.
the
A
smuggler
donkey
of drugs.
crossed with a horse produces either a
That's
mule
right.
or
Yeah.
a hinny.
So the smuggler of drugs is a mule, and it's depending on the gender, it's either a mule or a hinny, and they're the offspring of a donkey and a horse.
No horse.
Yeah, let's just clear that up. It's actually the gender of the parents. So when a donkey is crossed with a horse, it produces either a mule or a hinny.
Depending on whether it's a male donkey or a female donkey.
Yes.
Exactly, or a female horse. So
Yes.
a mule is the progeny of a male donkey, a jack, and a female horse.
Yes.
And is also, as you rightly identified, a word for somebody who wittingly or unwittingly carries drugs across a border for somebody else. And the hinny is the progeny of a male horse and a female donkey, known as a jenny. And it's also a term of endearment in the northeast of England, as referenced in the folk song, "Keep Your Feet Still, Geordie Hinny."
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That is 6 out of 6 for the north of England. Well done. Getting off to a cracking start. OK, Scotland. Val and Alan, you start with the listener's question too. This is from Mickey Wynne Davis in Oxford in Surrey. How do a Scottish castle, the ghost of Ellie Kedwood, and a former Prime Minister connect to a writer of dystopian fiction? How does a Scottish castle, the ghost of Ellie Kedward, and a former Prime Minister connect to a writer of dystopian fiction?
Well, we started off in completely the wrong direction with this, because we started thinking about the Castle of May, which was the Queen Mother's castle in the north of Scotland, and Theresa May, the former Prime Minister. And then we realised nothing else fitted, so we went back to square one.
Well, we got into it through really George Orwell, possibly as the writer of dystopian fiction, whose name was, of course, Eric Blair.
Correct.
Which took us to Blair Athol.
A lovely castle.
Fine castle.
Yeah.
Is it in Perthshire?
Of course it's in Perthshire.
Of course it's in native Perthshire. He's much more posh than he sounds. And that took us to, of course, Tony Blair. And we think the ghost of Ellie Kedward is the Blair Witch Project MacGuffin.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. The ghost of Ellie Kedward. And in the plot, Ellie Kedward was a local woman banished from the Blair township in the 18th century for alleged witchcraft, and again comes back to haunt the woods. Well, that's another 6 out of 6. Wow. So let's just recap that. That was how do a Scottish castle, the ghost of Ellie Kedward and a former Prime Minister connect to a writer of dystopian fiction. And of course the link is the name Blair. Blair Athol near Pitlochry in Perthshire, also Blair Castle, historically the seat of the Dukes of Athol, the chief of the Clan Murray. We have the ghost of Ellie Kedward in the Blair Witch Project, which was a horror film. Tony Blair, of course, former Prime Minister. And Eric Blair was the real name of George Orwell, author of 1984. OK, you're going to have to stop whispering now, North of England, and start answering, because we've got some music for you now. And a simple question to go with it. What do these 3 pieces have in common?
Shall I tell you a story? Once upon a time,
Good. So we heard 3 pieces of music, and you need to answer what they have in common.
Well, the first piece of music is an extract from Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells. The second piece of music, I think, is Dance to the Music by Sly and the Family Stone.
And the last piece of music is Peter and the Wolf.
And so it's quite self-evident what they've got in common, I think. We don't even need to tell you.
Keeping it secret, are you?
Is it they all have an instrument in common? Like, I don't know.
Oh, wait a second. Is it to do with the fact that that piece of Tubular Bells is just before Vivian Stanshall starts to tell you the individual instruments that are coming up, like 2 slightly distorted guitars, etc., etc.
So it's an instructional, kind of an instructional thing, an educational.
Well, the instruments are announced, as it were, as they appear.
Absolutely.
And the same
correct.
happens in Sly and the Family Stone.
And in Peter and the Wolf.
And in Peter and the Wolf, obviously, yes.
That's absolutely right. So we truncated all these extracts before the bits where you hear. So, for instance, in part 1 of Tubular Bells, you've got the comedian Vivian Stanshall intoning the list of instruments contributing to the sound picture, all of them played by Oldfield himself. And then, of course, it's a very common trope of American jazz or dance music for the band leader or the MC to introduce the band one by one.
Yeah.
And then earlier in Peter and the Wolf, the narrator describes each instrument in turn and how the motifs they play represent the human or animal characters. So, you know, Peter, his grandfather, the cat, the wolf, the hunters, and so on. Well, that's another 6 out of 6. OK, Scotland, can you match that with another 6? No pressure. Another listener's suggestion for you, and this is from Jonathan Perry, who sent us quite a few good ideas this year from his home in Tokyo. Thank you, Jonathan. Why might you or I complete the following sequence? The Spice Girls, the Hindu god Brahma, the guard dog offspring of Echidna and Typhon, and the inventor of the pan-galactic gargle blaster. So why might you or I complete the following sequence? The Spice Girls, the Hindu god Brahma, the guard dog offspring of Echidna and Typhon, and the inventor of the pan-galactic gargle blaster.
Well, I think this is a perfect round Britain quiz question because it does demonstrate that 2 heads are better than 1.
So you're on the right track.
we think it's about heads. And the Spice Girls, obviously, since there were 5 of them, have 5 heads.
Even reading the line, the inventor of the pan-galactic gargle blaster, it's Douglas Adams, isn't it? So, Stefan Beeblebrox.
Who has 2 heads?
2 heads. So the guard dog offspring of Echidna and Typhon, 3 heads?
It's Cerberus, the guard dog of the underworld.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Hindu god Brahma, therefore, must have 4 heads.
Absolutely right.
Either one of us would complete the sequence.
Yeah.
You choose.
Absolutely correct. Yes, so Brahma, the creator, is usually depicted with 4 heads pointing in 4 different directions to represent the 4 Vedas or Hindu religious texts. Well, I'm worried that you're all storming through these questions way too fast because that is another 6 out of 6. Fantastic. Okay. And this is for the north of England. Why might James Brown want you to take him to the setting for a Wordsworth sonnet of 1802, a Venetian prisoner's last lookout, and a place where he'd be feeling groovy? Why might James Brown want you to take him to the setting for a Wordsworth sonnet of 1802, a Venetian prisoner's last lookout, and a place where he'd be feeling groovy?
Well, if I could just start out by saying that one of the rejected theme, we use the Penguin Cafe Orchestra as the theme for Round Britain Quiz, but I do know that it was a close run thing between that and Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine by James Brown, in which, during the course of which, many times he extols us to take it to the bridge.
Yeah.
Absolutely
And the
correct.
first bridge is Westminster Bridge. Earth hath not anything to show more fair.
Upon Westminster Lines written upon Westminster Bridge or upon Westminster Bridge by
That's
Wordsworth.
the one. The Venetian prisoner's last lookout's probably the Bridge of Sighs.
Yeah.
And do we know why the Bridge of Sighs is called the Bridge of Sighs?
Well, because it's your last glimpse of...
You went from the prison to wherever you were being
Yeah.
executed.
And so you would give a melancholy sigh seeing your last of beautiful Venice and freedom.
Yeah.
Sighs, you were taken to the interrogation chambers in the Doge's palace.
And you'd be feeling groovy. Feeling groovy is often the wrongly attributed title of Simon and Garfunkel's 49th Street Bridge song.
Slightly wrong on the bridge.
Well, the number. Have I got the number wrong? It's the 48th Street Bridge song.
Did you say 49?
Yes. Have I forgotten the number?
It's the 59th bridge.
59, not 49.
Very close.
Okay.
Yeah, very close. Yeah, it is actually the Queensborough Bridge, spanning the East River
Yes.
in New York, linking Manhattan and Queens. And now officially named the Ed Koch Queensborough Bridge after the former mayor of
Really?
New
Yeah.
York. So let's just recap on that. James Brown famously said, "Take me to the bridge," as he was wont to do at intervals in live performances, and they are all indeed bridges. We have Westminster's Bridge, described in the Wordsworth Sonnet. Earth has not anything to show more fair. The Bridge of Sighs in Venice, and Feeling Groovy is a reference to the Simon & Garfunkel song released in 1966, whose actual title is the 59th Street Bridge song. I don't think I'm going to penalise you for 49 instead of 59. I think that would be mean. So I'm going to be generous and
Slip of
the tongue, and give you another 6 out of 6. Okay. Val and Alan, your next question has music attached, and it's been sent to us by Martin Jameson in Heaton Moor, who emailed us at rbq@bbc.co.uk. And the question is, explain why the 4th describes the other 3.
City of stars, are you shining just for me? City of stars, there's so much that I can't see.
Okay, so why does that fourth piece of music describe the other three?
Well, You're Gorgeous is Baby Bird, so we're now going to have to work backwards because we suspect it's possibly the names of baby birds. But bear with us.
Sugar Plum Fairy is the third piece on the Nutcracker Suite. No, is it not? Dance, the Sugar Plum
I mean, you're
Fairy?
right that it's a piece of ballet music, but not that one.
It's from the Nutcracker, though, I think. No?
Unless it's from Swan Lake
Swan
and
Lake.
it's Signet.
Signet, yeah.
The Signet.
Correct.
Okay, so it's a Signet.
Do you recognise that first piece of music?
Very vaguely.
The first was by one of many stars whose career started as a child star on the Mickey Mouse Club. You'll also know him from The Notebook.
Justin Timberlake.
And a famous Oscars scandal. A film that almost won Best Film.
When we opened the envelope and it said La La Land, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But our brains have now gone into
So,
meltdown.
yes, so you're right about La La Land.
God.
So you're looking for the lead.
Yeah. God, the name's gone.
Any idea about the second piece of music? Who might have been playing piano?
Chick somebody. Jazz pianist, Chick. I just couldn't think.
I know.
Chick Money.
Yeah, I'll check you
Who was a very fine pianist as well.
You're going to kick yourself when you... Somebody who worked with Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock.
Chick Corea.
Correct. So you've got a Signet, a Chick. And...
Gosling, Ryan Gosling. God.
You got there, absolutely. So the full song, You're Gorgeous by Baby Bird, describes, we had Ryan Gosling singing City of Stars from the soundtrack of La La Land. That was Chick Corea playing piano from Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. And we had Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Signets from Swan Lake. Well, you got there in the end, but I had to give you quite a bit of help, so I'm afraid that's a 3 out of 6 for Scotland. North of England, question 7. And this is another listener's idea for you, Adele and Stuart, and it's been sent to us by Alex Melnick, who listens to us in Los Angeles. Gosh, we've had Tokyo and Los Angeles. It's rather wonderful to think of all these people listening to RBQ around the world. So here's the question. Why would addressing a letter to the composer of a Christmas song, the creator of a Norwegian whole, and I should say for listeners at home, that's a capital H, an MI6 officer who invented, another MI6 officer, the originator of Elliot Chase, and a mocking presenter, and that's mocking with a capital M again, have caused a problem for the typing pool. So I'll just ask that again. Why would addressing a letter to the composer of a Christmas song, the creator of a Norwegian whole, an MI6 officer who invented another MI6 officer, the originator of Elliot Chase, and a mocking presenter have caused a problem for the typing pool?
Right, we think this is about, is it called diacritics? Accents. Diacritical marks, accents.
Yeah.
So that's what would cause the problem for the typing pool, because they'd have to work out how to do all the accents on the
old-fashioned typewriter, yes.
So, well, we're certain about the creator of a Norwegian whole, or hurler, I think is probably more accurate, is Jør Nesbø.
Very good.
We don't know the name of the accent that he has, but he's got an accent.
Well, it's that O with
It's
the
the
slash
O with
through
the
it.
thing,
And
yes.
I think we can just say O with a slash through
Oh,
it.
with the
yeah.
slash. Okay.
Yeah.
The MI6 officer who invented an MI6 officer, we reckon, is Le Carré,
Correct, who has an acute
who has an
accent.
acute accent.
The mocking presenter is Dara O'Brien, who has a diacritical remark on, I can't remember which of the,
think it's
it's
on
either
the
the I or the A of Brian.
Brian.
I or the A of Brian, isn't it?
No, but I'll give you this. It's actually over the O. That he's
really?
got the accent.
Okay.
That's original,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. The mocking presenter, that's him.
Yes.
So where
Yes,
we're
because he
stuck-
presented Mock the Week, or at least did until the show was cancelled
Yeah.
in last year.
Christmas song has a capital C and a capital S. Now, are we meant to think from that we're talking about the Christmas song, the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire?
We are.
Yes, which is just called the Christmas song. And the composer of that is, as we all know,
Thingy.
You're Nesbert again. No.
we think it's one of the people like Irving Berlin who changed his name from something which had an accent on.
I'm looking at Kirsty and she's not.
No, she's not looking
So
good.
we're actually looking for someone whose proper name has an accent on it. Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those big guys, isn't it? Carmichael Porter, Berlin. Isn't it one? Is it
No,
not?
they haven't got any accents. No.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. Well, let's try
Elliot
Elliot
Chase.
Chase.
We
Yeah.
don't know much about Elliot Chase, but he sounds to me as if he might be a character from a Noel Coward.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And so Noel, of course, has got the 2 dots over the E.
Yeah, he was a character in Private Lives.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So we need to
So
think.
we basically need
we need the composer of
with
the
an
Christmas
accent.
song. Well, it's popularised by Nat King Cole,
No, that won't help.
or Nat King Cole, as he is known in Scandinavia.
So they were looking for the person who composed it and also co-authored the lyrics. Well, the
Did
name.
he?
We know that there's an accent. And
Yeah. Will it be a grave accent? Would
It's
it be a grave
it's an E acute.
Oh, so another E acute.
Mm-hmm.
But not at the end.
And it's a
Yes,
name.
at the end.
And it's a
It's
name.
at the end.
And it's a name
Good
we'll know.
Lord.
Is it a name we'll know?
You will know it.
Mel
Mel
Torme.
Torme.
Correct.
The only other acute accent I can think of.
Mel Torme.
Mel Torme.
Well done,
yeah.
well done on that. So, do you want to just recap on that for us?
You recap.
Yes, well, the diacritical remarks would cause a problem for the typing pool, as everyone will know who types regularly. The composer of the Christmas song is Mel Torme, whose nickname was the Velvet Fog because of his singing style. And and in his obituary in The Guardian, they said sometimes referred to as the Velvet Frog. The creator of the Norwegian Hole is the detective Harry Hole, or Harry Höller, which is a creation of the writer Jørn Nesbø, who has the line through the O.
I'm loving the pronunciations there.
The MI6 officer who invented an MI6 officer, as Adele worked out, is John le Carré. Elliot Chase is a character in Private Lives by Noel Coward, 2 dots over the E.
Yeah, and actually Coward played himself in the original West End run in 1930 and on Broadway the following year, and his
Right.
co-star was Gertrude Lawrence.
Yes.
And Dara O'Brien was the former presenter of Mock the Week, and there is an accent over the O of Dara O'Brien.
Yeah. So I think that is a 5 out of 6. Well done. Okay, final question to Scotland. What is the connection between one of the most prolific British writers of detective stories, tectonic plate theory, and Wensleydale cheese? It's classic RBQ, isn't it? What is the connection between one of the most prolific British writers of detective stories, tectonic plate theory, and Wensleydale cheese?
Well, we started off scratching our heads a bit with this one, but we think that Wensleydale cheese might lead us to Wallace and Gromit. As not even Wensleydale was the question asked when Wendelin said she didn't like cheese, which upset Wallace not a little.
It did, indeed.
So that takes us to, in terms of prolific British writers of detective stories, takes us to Edgar Wallace.
And there we become stuck.
You know quite a lot about tectonic plate theory.
I was getting mixed up with James Hutton, who I know has something to do with it, but we were trying to find a Wallace link.
We're looking for a 19th century naturalist, and it's sort of something of a rival to Darwin in some ways.
I mean, he was clearly called Wallace, wasn't he? But,
Yeah,
we
Wallace. But we're just groping in the dark here.
It was Alfred Russel Wallace, who was a naturalist whose work arrived at very similar conclusions to those of Charles Darwin at a very similar time, and he identified something called the Wallace Line. This is apparently random borderline in Indonesia, either side of which the local flora and fauna were radically different. And so it turned out to be a fault line where 2 ancient continents met, and it was absolutely key in establishing the plate tectonics theory. Well, you very nearly got there. You got Edgar Wallace, who wrote nearly 1,000 short stories and about 170 novels, and managed to be a war reporter as well. This is a good bit of trivia. He was working on the screenplay for King Kong when he fell ill and died. And he was also the first person ever to broadcast a sports report on the BBC when he commentated on the Grand National in 1923. So there we go. He was one of the most prolific writers of detective stories. You rightly got The Lover of Wensleydale Cheese, the animated character Wallace, created by Nick Park and voiced for many years by the late Peter Sallis. And the naturalist who came up with the Wallace line theory was Alfred Russel Wallace. So I'm going to give you 4 out of 6 for that, Scotland. So that was the last question today, and it leaves the scores looking like this. 23 points to the north of England and 19 points to Scotland. Well done to both teams. There will be a revenge fixture between these 4 in a few weeks' time, so you can turn it all around, Scotland. The 2 teams we haven't met so far this series, from Wales and Northern Ireland, will be here next week, and I'll have the answer to this question, which I want you to think about in the meantime. Why would the sounds of clapping be out of place in the company of cricketer Richie, actress Yvonne and singer Gilbert? And that pronunciation might turn out to be important. Don't write in with the answer, just listen and see if you're right when I give you the solution next week. Thanks for listening and goodbye.